Welcome, everyone, to the Exalted Word Ministry podcast.
Great to be here.
So, following up on Bishop Wilson's Easter message, I found something he said really striking.
Oh, yeah. What was that?
He mentioned that the resurrection of Jesus Christ isn't just, a matter of faith alone. He suggested it's actually something that's faced scrutiny, almost like legal scrutiny.
Ah, yes. That point. It's a powerful idea, isn't it? That the evidence has been weighed, really analyzed by people with sharp, logical minds. Like a case in court.
Exactly. And that got us thinking, who's actually done that? People trained in law, trained to pick apart arguments, find the flaws. Have they looked into the resurrection?
Right. Because it's one thing to believe, but it's quite another when someone trained in legal reasoning looks at the evidence and finds it compelling.
Precisely. So for this deep dive, we thought we'd explore the journeys of a few legal professionals who did just that. And interestingly, many started out as, skeptics.
You weren't predisposed to believe, necessarily.
Not at all. So the goal here is to understand what evidence they looked at, what they found so persuasive. Maybe we should start with Sir Lionel Luckhoo. Now there's a name. A legal heavyweight.
Oh, absolutely. Sir Lionel Luckhoo. The man's record is incredible. Guinness Book of World Records, wasn't it? For 245 consecutive murder acquittals.
245. That's unbelievable. Knighted twice, too.
Yeah. So definitely not someone easily swayed. He had a rigorous legal mind. And what's fascinating is how he approached the Gospels.
How so?
Well, he treated them essentially as legal depositions, sworn testimonies. He analyzed the accounts of the resurrection witnesses from that perspective.
Okay, so looking at them purely as witness statements, what did that legal eye see?
He found a remarkable consistency in the core story. Now, you'd expect minor differences, right? People see things slightly differently.
Sure, that's normal. Adds credibility sometimes.
Exactly. But he found the central fact Jesus died was buried. The tomb was empty. He appeared afterwards were coherent across the different accounts. Legally speaking, major contradictions between witnesses. That kills a case.
Right. That kind of internal consistency across multiple sources is pretty compelling from a legal standpoint.
It really is. And then he looked at the disciples, their transformation.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's always struck me as powerful. They were hiding, scared.
Terrified, scattered. And then suddenly they're out there proclaiming the resurrection, facing beatings, prison, even death.
And Luckhoo argued, people just don't do that, do they? Suffer and die willingly for something they know is a lie.
Precisely. His legal training told him that kind of unwavering conviction, especially in the face of death, without any obvious gain. That points strongly towards them genuinely believing it happened. It's a powerful indicator of credible testimony.
Makes sense. No motive to fabricate. Quite the opposite.
Right. And then the big one, the empty tomb itself.
The central mystery, if you don't accept the resurrection.
Exactly. Luckhoo looked at the facts presented. Roman guards posted specifically to stop the body being stolen. A heavy stone, sealed.
Right, maximum security for the time.
And yet the tomb is empty. And crucially, no one ever produced the body later to shut the whole thing down. From a legal viewpoint, that's significant. Where did it go? How did it get past the guards?
Very hard questions to answer if you rule out the resurrection. So, Luckhoo's final take was pretty strong.
Extremely strong. He actually said, I'm quoting here, "The evidence for the resurrection of Jesus Christ is so overwhelming that it compels acceptance by proof, which leaves absolutely no room for doubt."
Wow. From a lawyer with that track record.
Yeah.
Quite a statement.
It certainly is.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit. Frank Morison. His story is different because he actually set out wanting to disprove it, right?
That's right. Morison was a British lawyer, also a journalist, and he was skeptical. The title of his book says it all, really. Who moved the stone? That was his question. He wanted to solve that puzzle.
Using his legal and investigative skills.
Yes. And like Luckhoo, he looked hard at the empty tomb scenario. The guards, the seal. He tried to find a natural explanation.
And couldn't find one that held water.
Apparently not. The guards stealing it, they'd face death. The disciples, they were scared. And how would they overpower soldiers? The authorities taking it, why wouldn't they produce it later to stop the rumors?
Yeah.
He just couldn't construct a plausible, natural scenario for the body's disappearance.
So the lack of a good counter-explanation was a big factor for him.
A very big factor. But another thing really struck him too, the witnesses.
Okay, what about them?
The fact that the first witnesses reported in the Gospels were women. Mary Magdalene and the others.
Right, and in that culture.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In first-century Jewish society, a woman's testimony in court was considered, practically worthless, legally invalid in many cases.
So if you were making up a story, trying to convince people, You wouldn't choose women as your star witnesses. It seems counterintuitive.
That was Morison's point precisely. He figured if you're fabricating this, you'd pick Peter or James or someone with more social and legal standing. The fact the Gospels report women being first strongly suggested to him that they were just reporting what actually happened, even if it wasn't the most strategic choice for persuasion at the time.
That's a subtle but really powerful argument about authenticity.
It is. And he also looked closely at the type of appearances Jesus reportedly made after the resurrection.
Not just fleeting glimpses.
No. The accounts describe him appearing to individuals, like Mary, but also to small groups, large groups. Even 500 at once, according to Paul. He eats with them, talks with them, they touch his wounds.
So harder to dismiss as just grief-induced hallucinations.
Much harder. Hallucinations are typically very personal, subjective, not shared group experiences with physical interaction over weeks. Morison found the nature and variety of these appearances difficult to explain away psychologically.
So Morison starts as a skeptic trying to debunk it and ends up writing a classic defense of the resurrection. Quite the turnaround.
A complete turnaround driven by where he felt the evidence led him.
Okay, one more fascinating case. Lee Strobel.
Ah, yes. The case for Christ. Many people know his story.
Yale Law School graduate, investigative journalist at the Chicago Tribune.
And a committed atheist. His wife's conversion to Christianity really prompted him. He decided to use his journalistic and legal skills to investigate, basically to disprove Christianity for her and for himself.
A 2-year investigation, I read. He really dug in.
He did, like a major investigative piece. He didn't just read books, he interviewed experts. Lots of them.
What kind of evidence did he focus on?
He covered a lot of ground. For instance, the medical evidence. He spoke to medical experts about crucifixion. Was Jesus really dead? Or just unconscious?
The old swoon theory.
Exactly. And the experts he consulted were adamant, based on the descriptions of the scourging, the crucifixion itself, the spear wound, medical certainty of death.
Okay, so that addressed one common objection.
Yeah.
What else?
Documentary evidence. He investigated the New Testament manuscripts. How early are they? Are they reliable copies? Do they stand up to the kind of textual criticism applied to other ancient documents?
And he found them credible.
He concluded that the evidence for their early dating and reliability was surprisingly strong, certainly comparable to or better than other accepted ancient texts, suggesting they were written close to the events by eyewitnesses or people who knew them.
Interesting. And like Morison, he tackled the psychological angle too, the appearances.
Yes, very thoroughly. He consulted psychologists and physicians about the hallucination hypothesis. Could all those different people in different places at different times have hallucinated the same thing?
And the conclusion was?
The conclusion was that mass hallucination just doesn't work like that. It couldn't explain the variety, the group settings, the physical interactions described.
Did he look at any other sort of circumstantial evidence?
Definitely. Things like, how did this tiny movement explode so rapidly across the Roman Empire despite brutal persecution? Why did key skeptics suddenly convert? Like James, Jesus' own brother, who didn't believe during Jesus' lifetime.
Right. James became a leader in the Jerusalem church eventually.
And Saul of Tarsus, the Apostle Paul, a persecutor who became arguably the most influential apostle after a dramatic encounter with the risen Christ. Strobel saw these conversions and the church's explosive growth against all odds as powerful circumstantial evidence pointing back to the resurrection being real.
So again, someone highly trained in law and investigation, starting as an atheist, follows the evidence and
concludes the case for Christ, particularly the resurrection, is compelling. He became a believer himself.
It really brings us back full circle to Bishop Wilson's point, doesn't it?
It does. These examples, Luckhoo, Morison, Strobel, they weren't just accepting things on blind faith. They were using the tools of their trade. Logic, evidence analysis, critical thinking.
They followed the evidence trail, and for them, it led decisively to the resurrection.
Yeah. And looking at their journeys, you see common threads, don't you? The empty tomb keeps coming up. The transformation of the disciples is a huge factor. The nature of the eyewitness accounts and the post-resurrection appearances. These seem to be key pieces that convinced these analytical minds.
So for our listeners, thinking about all this, what's the takeaway?
Well, I think it reinforces what the bishop was saying. Belief in the resurrection isn't disconnected from reason or evidence. It actually rests on a foundation that has withstood some pretty intense scrutiny from people trained to find weaknesses in arguments.
He shows it's not just a spiritual conviction, but it has historical and, as these cases suggest, even legally defensible grounds.
Yeah.
We've heard about a top trial lawyer, a skeptical journalist, an atheist investigative reporter, all initially doubters, all reaching the same core conclusion.
A conclusion based on examining the evidence available. As Bishop Wilson put it, it's presented as a truth, historically grounded, that has faced this kind of examination.
Which really leads us right back to that powerful question Bishop Wilson asked at the end of his Easter message. A question we want to leave you all with today.
What was it again?
He asked. Now, the question remains, what will you do with that truth?
That's the challenge, isn't it? It invites personal reflection. Consider this evidence that persuaded these sharp, skeptical minds. What does it mean for you? For your own beliefs?
It suggests the resurrection isn't just a story or a metaphor. It's presented as a reality that convinced even those trained to doubt. Something worth thinking deeply about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Yes, thank you.